I worked the late shift at Moonlight Books, a small, dimly lit bookstore on Elm Street, and I always took the same night bus home. The 1:37 a.m. Route 12 was practically empty on weeknights. Just me, my thoughts, and the soft hiss of the brakes. The bus rattled through deserted city blocks, headlights cutting through pools of darkness beneath flickering street lamps. Because I closed early on Wednesdays, I made it a habit. Up the creaking stairs, a quick nod to the night clerk in the till, then slip out the back door into the hush. By 1:45 a.m., I was at the bus stop, the neon Elm and 5th sign buzzing overhead. One Wednesday, as I climbed the steps onto the Route 12, I noticed him almost immediately. He was already seated 3 rows behind me, hunched over, wearing a faded denim jacket and a pale, wide-brimmed hat that cast his face in shadow. His posture was rigid, as though he was waiting for me. My chest tightened. I'd never seen him at the bus stop before. Normally, the only other passengers at that hour were an elderly woman returning from a night shift at the hospital or a sleepy college student clutching textbooks. He didn't make a sound as the door closed and the bus lurched forward. The fluorescent lights inside flickered twice before stabilizing, casting a pale, sickly glow over empty seats. I chose the window seat on the right side, a few rows ahead of him. Every time I glanced back, he remained perfectly still, staring straight ahead. His dark eyes, barely visible under the hat's brim, seemed intent on me. My throat tightened, and I forced myself to keep my gaze fixed on the passing streetlights outside the window. At the first transfer point, one stop past the old cinema shell, I expected him to get off. The bus groaned to a halt under a cracked street lamp, and a handful of sleepy passengers shuffled out. Instead of leaving, the man rose, his feet sliding across the aisle as if he'd memorized my schedule. He stepped forward, then paused to look at the schedule posted by the door, as though verifying his rate. Then he turned and slumped into the seat directly behind me, closing the gap. My skin prickled. I shifted in my seat to try and create distance. I watched his profile in the reflection of the window. A lean face, cheekbones sharp as broken glass, and lips that didn't move when he breathed. When the bus jolted around a bend near Riverside Park, he flinched and stared at me. I caught sight of him raising a thin, pale hand toward his mouth, as if fighting off a cough. My heart felt hollow as I realized each time I blinked, he'd edged a seat closer. I considered asking him what he wanted, but my voice caught in my throat. I kept my headphones in, turned the volume up, played a song I vaguely remembered from childhood, something folksy that reminded me of home. If he wanted attention, I wouldn't give it to him. My satchel sat on the seat beside me, baseball cap and jacket folded neatly on top. I tried to remain calm, but my hands shook as the bus rattled along its route. When the bus reached the second transfer point, where I usually switch to the 3:10 a.m. Route 7, to get closer to my neighborhood, I rose and pressed the stop button, heart hammering. I half expected him to follow me onto the Route 7, and I was right. As I exited onto the empty, rain-slicked street, the suited man parsed the motion sensors and rose with the other passengers. He slipped into the same seat behind me once the doors closed, just before they hissed shut. I stifled a gasp. The streetlights glinted off his hat's brim as my face went hot. I sank into my seat, staring straight at the seat back in front of me, praying he'd be gone by the time we reached the final leg. The bus wound past shuttered storefronts and boarded up youth centers. The hum of the engine sounded louder than usual. Every stoplight felt like a trap. The guy didn't move, his dark jacket a blot against the dim interior. I could feel his eyes drilling into the nape of my neck, sending shivers through my spine. Just before the final stop, I dozed off, overwhelming my anxiety. I remember dreaming of flickering bus lights, transforming into eyes, watching me. Then, with a jolt, I woke up to sunlight. I mean street light, lamps strobing outside. The bus was nearly empty. I glimpsed only the driver's silhouette behind the partition and the cold glare of street lamps bouncing off wet pavement outside. My elbow brushed something small and folded in my right hand. I looked down. It was a slip of paper, yellowed at the edges as though ripped from an old notebook. My pulse thundered in my ears as I unfolded it. Scrawled in neat, unhurried handwriting were 2 lines. Emily Thompson, 234 Walnut Drive. My blood ran cold. Emily Thompson was my name, and 234 Walnut Drive was my home address. No apartment number, not even a building name. My stomach knotted. My legs felt suddenly like water. I clutched the note and ran up the aisle toward the front of the bus, tears stinging my eyes. I pounded on the partition with shaking knuckles. "Driver, stop. Please, let me off." The driver glanced at me through the mirror, his expression hidden behind the tinted glass. He pulled a cord marked brake fiercely, and the bus screeched to a halt in the middle of the wet street. "What's wrong, dear?" His voice was calm, almost gentle, and I realized he thought I was drunk or delusional. I barely squeezed out. "There's a man on the bus, he's been following me. He just gave me this." I held up the paper. The driver turned, peered over his steering wheel. "Who? Where?" I pointed behind me, but as he glanced back, the seat was empty. Empty. The man had silently slipped off at the previous stop. I must have missed it in my panic, and the only sign he'd been there was the slip of paper still clutched in my fist. I stumbled off the bus while the driver radioed dispatch. He told me he'd wait until police arrived. Standing on the curb, rain plinking off my hair, I dialed 911. My voice trembled as I relayed everything. The rides, the transfer points, the man's face concealed by shadow, the note. The dispatcher asked if I wanted to press charges. I said I only wanted protection. Half an hour later, though it felt like forever, a squad car rolled up with red and blue lights splashing against closed storefronts. The young female officer took my statement, then asked me to come down to the station to file a formal report. I spent the next 3 hours in a tiny windowless room at the precinct, my eyes stinging with exhaustion. I gave them the exact route and times, a description of the man's clothes, and I handed over the slip of paper. The police told me they'd pull security footage from all the transfer stops and canvass the neighborhood for any witnesses. They said someone matching his description had no prior record, so finding him wouldn't be easy. I promised to call immediately if anything new happened. I left the station at 5 a.m., my chest hollow, the sky just beginning to yawn gray. I called my best friend, Jessica, and begged her to stay with me until I got home. When I arrived at Walnut Drive, West Side Apartments, I saw her car waiting. She met me on the sidewalk, arms open, as though she'd been expecting the worst. I showed her the slip of paper. She shook her head, white-knuckled. "This is insane," she whispered. I slumped against the brick wall, tears spilling down my cheeks. That week was a blur. I slept with every light on, refused to answer knocks at my door, and kept the deadbolt locked. Each night I jumped at every creak, every flourish of wind against the window. I took caffeine pills instead of sleeping, stayed up researching self-defense classes, changed my bus times, sometimes taking the 10:23 p.m. instead of 1:37 a.m., even though that meant walking across town late at night. Every time I passed a bus stop, I half expected to see him emerge from the shadows, notebook in hand. 5 nights later, the police called. They'd found his abandoned backpack near an alley behind the bus terminal, but no direct evidence linked him to me. No wallet, no ID, just a black canvas pack filled with unused bus tickets, an old camera, and a small address book with my name written at the top. The rest of the pages contained dozens of other names and scribbled addresses. Everyone the man had collected, according to the officers. I felt bile rise when I saw the pages. The thought that I was just one of many made my blood run cold. After that, I barely slept. I stopped taking buses altogether. I called into work sick and spent days researching moving companies. Every time I saw a stranger walking behind me, I nearly called the police again. I installed new locks, bought a door barricade, and pepper spray. I switched my routine, groceries in the morning, errands in broad daylight, but the dread lingered in the back of my mind like a bad smell, suffocating any sense of safety. When I finally mustered the courage, I gave notice to my landlord. I found a small studio on the far side of town, near nightlights and busier streets. I didn't use my old name on apartment paperwork. I introduced myself as Emma Thomas to the new neighbors. I changed my phone number, set up all mail to forward, and shipped the bulk of my things overnight. The day I moved, a heavy gray sky cried on my boxes as I loaded the U-Haul. I scanned every passing car, every shadow, expecting him to appear. But there was only the hum of the city and the clatter of moving furniture. Now, 6 months later, I still live in constant unease. I avoid riding buses late at night. Instead, I split cab fares with friends or walk in well-lit areas. When I first moved, I found myself checking my new apartment window for his reflection, unused camera in hand. I still keep my curtains drawn at night, and every knock or unexpected ring of the doorbell jolts me like an electric shock. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see him, his gaunt face half hidden beneath the brim of that dusty hat, the dark denim jacket stiff around his shoulders, the notebook bristling with names like a twisted catalog. I imagine the slip of paper sliding across my fingers, the crisp text blotting out my breath, the sudden need to flee. I still think about looking over my shoulder every time I board a bus or walk past a dim corner. I share this story as a warning. If you ever feel eyes on you, if a stranger appears on your regular bus route and stays just out of arm's reach, trust your gut. If you find a slip of paper with your name and address in your hand, no matter how harmless the rest of your day seems, run. Call the police. Change everything. Because when someone becomes your shadow, following your every move, taking notes on your life, there's no telling what they'll do next. And when you look up and realize they know exactly where you live, there's no place left to hide. I started running that trail the summer after my freshman year of college, hoping to shed stress and earn a bit of extra pocket money by training for the local 10K. The old reservoir trail lay on the outskirts of town, looping around dark pine woods and pale reeds that swayed like anxious ghosts. At dawn, mist hugged the water, and the air tasted like dew and pine needles. I'd slip on my neon running shoes, grab my water bottle, and head out before first light, alone with the soft thump of my heart and the distant hoot of an owl. It was peaceful, at least. It was supposed to be. It began on a Tuesday morning in early July. The sky was still a bruise of violet as I jogged past the chain-link fence that guarded the reservoir's entrance. My headphones pumped a steady beat, and the path ahead twisted through pine shadows and golden toads of light. where the sun's first rays pressed through needles. I had covered just over a mile when I sensed someone behind me. I glanced over my shoulder. A man jogging about 20 feet back, dressed entirely in black, dark joggers, a long-sleeved top, a baseball cap pulled low, and dark sunglasses that caught the faint glow of my headlamp. My breath caught. I slowed to a walk, hoping he was just another early morning runner who'd pass me soon. But he didn't. Instead, he matched my pace, his footfalls soft but deliberate. I sped up again. He did too. My pulse throbbed as I rounded a bend in the trail, where silver birches blanketed the ground in fallen leaves, and the air smelled of damp earth. I could see a small wooden bench up ahead, ornately carved with initials that local rumor said belonged to lovers who'd carved their names years ago. I reached the bench, bent over to stretch, and gaped in disbelief when he jogged past me to the bench's far side and slowed to a stop, using the same stretch I was doing. My hands flew to my hips as I forced myself to look away and keep moving. Every morning for nearly 2 weeks, it was the same. I'd start my run at 5:30 a.m., and exactly 15 minutes in, I'd sense him behind me. Sometimes I caught glimpses, the dark outline of his body, the glint of sunglasses even in pre-dawn dimness, the slight lean of his shoulders that suggested he'd been running longer than I had. I tried varying my route, ran the inner loop instead of the full trail. Sprinted for a bit, slowed to a fast walk, but no matter what, he was always there, maintaining that 20-foot distance. When I doubled back, he did too. When I ducked into a side path to do sprints by an old oak, he popped up just out of sight, paused only long enough to ensure I saw him, then vanished behind the thick brush. It was as if he was mapping my shape, memorizing every breath, every stride. One Friday, after a particularly grueling study session, I nodded to the cherry-colored sunrise trembling on the horizon and laced my shoes later than usual, closer to 6 a.m. Maybe, I thought foolishly, if I changed my schedule, he'd slip up. At exactly 6:17, I left the trailhead, just as a family of deer froze in the reeds by the water's edge. I lumbered through the early light, sweat already beading along my hairline, as I rounded a curve near a drop-off where the water shimmered like liquid mercury. I felt him step lightly onto the ground behind me. I froze in place, chest tightening. He jogged past, his gaze locked on mine, but he didn't look like a runner. His pace was mechanical, robotic. His clothes were too dark, even for early dawn. He seemed to move as though he belonged to the shadows. I sprinted the last half-mile back to my apartment door, heart hammering so hard I thought neighbors might hear. Inside, I tossed my shoes and leaned against the wall, gasping for air. My legs shook. I raked a hand through my damp hair, tears stinging my eyes as adrenaline receded. But I told myself it was in my head. Paranoia. Maybe brought on by too many horror podcasts on late-night study breaks. I resolved to ask my roommate, Alex, to run with me. Safety in numbers, I thought. The next morning, I woke to a text from Alex. Running today? Wanna grab coffee after? I smiled at my phone. I needed the distraction. At 5:15, we set off together, jogging side by side through pink-lit pines. Alex chatted about class, about group projects and weekend plans. For a moment, I felt relief, but that familiar prickle crawled up my spine. I slowed, pointing toward a thick stand of hemlocks. I think I left my headphones there yesterday. As Alex circled back to look, I dashed ahead, peering over my shoulder. There he was, the silhouette moving beneath the canopy, edging closer to where Alex had been seconds before. I screamed. Alex spun around just in time to see the man pause, lower his head as if catching his breath. and motioned to his phone held at chest level. Then he took a step backward into the woods and disappeared. We bolted off the trail, grit and pine needles flying beneath our feet. Minutes later, safe behind my locked apartment door, I sank to the floor, chest heaving. Alex patted my shoulder, eyes wide, panic-stricken. He called campus security while I rummaged through my jacket pockets. When I pulled out my water bottle, I felt something, like plastic tape to the underside. I flipped it over and peeled off the tape to reveal a tiny black GPS tracker. Wires coiled inside a small box. My stomach lurched into my throat. He was tracking me. Campus security said they'd increase patrols at dawn, but cameras on the trail were ancient. Grainy blobs best used to detect injured wildlife, not stalkers. The officer gave me a card and advised extra caution. If you see him again, call us immediately. I thanked him, voice tight with fear. For a few days, I trained at the campus gym treadmill, not the same, but safer under bright lights and CCTV cameras. Still, every spin of the belt on the shiny black surface made me flinch, and I jumped at every noise in the gym's locker room. I missed the open sky and the crispy air. A week passed with no sighting, but the dread in my gut smoldered like a dying ember. 3 nights ago, I decided, maybe stupidly, to go back to the trail. I lulled myself with excuses. I can't let one creep ruin something I love. I'll keep my phone close. Maybe bring pepper spray. At 5:30 a.m., the sky was awash of peach and mauve as I jogged to the trailhead. Pepper spray tucked in my hand. Every limb ached with tension. Every sense on high alert. My legs carried me forward as if on autopilot. 10 minutes in, I passed the old wooden bench, the carved initials faint but still legible. 8 p.m. Est. 08. I forced myself to do a quick stretch, tape my earbuds more securely. Check for the tracker under my water bottle. Nothing this time. I set off again, heart pounding with anxious hope. Maybe he'd gotten bored and moved on. Maybe this was the last time I ever saw him. As I approached the sharp bend where pine needles carpeted the ground, I slowed. No easy way to step aside on roots. So knobby they looked like skeletal fingers. My foot landed on something that crunched. I looked down, stomach dropping. A small backpack, black canvas, zippered. I kicked it aside, but my curiosity pinned me to the spot. I knelt and unzipped it. Inside were 4 Polaroid photos. Photo 1. A shot of me running from behind, taken at dawn. My form was stretched mid-stride, blackberry bushes lining the path. Photo 2. My apartment building's front door. Time-stamped July 12, 2024, 11:03 p.m. The porch light glowed, and my keys were in the lock. Photo 3. A view into my bedroom through the window. My bed unmade, clothes strewn on the floor. Time-stamped July 14. I was sleeping, unguarded, mouth slightly open. Photo 4. A close-up of my water bottle taken the morning I found the GPS tracker crumpled on the ground, where I'd kicked it. Time-stamped July 10, 2024, 5:59 a.m. A paper clip to the top read, "Watching you keeps me grounded. Don't worry, I'll protect what's mine." My breath lodged in my throat. The sun hadn't even fully risen, but it felt as though a cold hand had squeezed my heart. I shoved the Polaroids back in, dropped the backpack and fled. The trail seemed endless as I sprinted, branches whipping my arms and sweat stinging my eyes. When I reached the parking lot, the backpack lay where I'd left it, silent and ominous, as though daring me to go back. I called campus security again, voice shaking so badly the officer threatened to send backup if I didn't calm down. An officer a mile away said he'd send a patrol car to rendezvous with me. I waited 30 minutes with my phone perched on the dashboard, light flickering across the seat, as the officer arrived. He examined the photos without a word, slipping them into an envelope marked evidence. He advised once more, "Stay off the trail until we identify this guy. Change your schedule, run with a group or find a new route." I tried following his advice. I ran at sunset instead, around the lit track by the athletic center. But I jumped at every distant noise, the crash of a stray soccer ball, the hum of distant lawnmowers, the bark of a dog babysat by a neighbor. Even under lights, the track felt too public, too exposed. I thought about switching to treadmill running, but that felt like admitting defeat. Still, I wasn't brave enough to try the trail again. Last night I woke to a flash of motion outside my bedroom window. Heavy footsteps on grass, then the soft click of my front door unlocking. My stomach dropped so hard I felt nauseous. I reached under my pillow for my pepper spray. Heart hammering, I tiptoed toward the door, breath shallow. Then, silence. I peered at my phone screen. 2:17 a.m. I flicked on my bedroom light and turned the lock. It refused to budge, inked on my front door window. In smudged red paint was a single word, "Run." I slammed my phone into my roommate's hand. "I need to leave," I whispered. Alex's eyes widened. I grabbed my keys and backpack, anything else I might need, and we fled into the still night. I didn't stop running until I reached campus security again, pounding on their door. The guard let me in, offered coffee and a safe place to sleep on a cot. At dawn, I packed a bag and drove to my parents' house 50 miles away, vowing I wouldn't return until this nightmare ended. Now I'm here, back in the safety of my childhood home. The trail lies 100 miles behind me, hazy with morning mist and pine shadows. Yet I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, waiting somewhere in the hush before sunrise, tracking my every move. I delete my running apps, wear a hat when I leave the house, and keep my phone in my hand, fingers curling around the pepper spray I never thought I'd buy. Every sound, a snapped twig, a car door slamming, a shadow flickering, makes me flinch, imagining him stepping out of the darkness. To anyone who runs alone at dawn, beware. One day, you might hear footsteps echoing yours, feel eyes burning into your skin, see a black silhouette materializing at your back. You might think twice before pausing to stretch or reaching to sip water, because that brief moment gave him the chance to draw nearer. If you ever find a GPS tracker stuck to your belongings or photos of yourself where you shouldn't be seen, run. Call the police. Change everything about your routine, because once someone is determined to make you their prey, every mile you run, every path you take, becomes a countdown until they catch your scent in the air, and then there's nowhere left to hide. I never imagined that a midnight shift at Big Jim's diner could turn into a waking nightmare. The diner sits at the end of a 2-mile stretch of cracked asphalt, its neon open 24 hours sign flickering like a lighthouse guiding lost ships. On clear nights, the highway hums quietly in the distance, an undercurrent of engines, tires on pavement, and the occasional indistinct radio static. Inside, chrome stools glint under fluorescent lights, and Formica tabletops reflect every spilled drop of coffee or scattering of salt. On most nights, I'd chat with regulars, tall truckers with grateful smiles, lonely students cramming for exams, or neighborhood insomniacs craving hot cocoa. But that Tuesday in late February, everything shifted. It was around 2:15 a.m. when I noticed him. As I wiped down the last booth after a sparse rush, the bell above the door jangled. I glanced up expecting one of our usual solo truckers, but instead a man in a wrinkled charcoal suit stepped inside. His shoes were scuffed, laces undone, and his shoulders hunched as though the weight of something heavy pressed him down. He carried a leather satchel that bulged awkwardly at the seams. Even in the muted glow of the flickering sign outside, I could see his green eyes glinting from beneath his low-brimmed fedora. He moved to the corner booth and sat down, back to the wall, as if preparing to stay a while. The seat across from him remained empty, giving him a wide angle to observe the entire diner. He ordered black coffee, no cream, no sugar, and paid in cash so crumpled it looked decades old. I poured his coffee without a word. Every instinct screamed that he wasn't here for a midnight snack. A half hour before closing, my phone buzzed with a text. My manager had called in sick and was asking if I could handle closing by myself. I stared at the screen, heart hammering. Closing meant I'd be alone when the last customers left. I forced a calm breath, wiped my palms on my apron, and mentally tallied the minutes until I could lock up and drive home. A few minutes later, while I was clearing the counter, I spotted movement in my peripheral vision. When I looked, the suited man was rising from his booth, silent, fluid. Before I could stop him, he reached under the Formica tabletop and slipped something flat across the metal edge. His eyes flicked to mine for a heartbeat, cold, calculating. Then he turned and pushed the door open. The neon sign outside sputtered and hissed, casting something like blood-red light across his back as he disappeared into the night. I swallowed hard, every nerve ending alive with dread. My boots clicked on the tiled floor as I approached the booth, slid into the seat opposite the table, and retrieved the folded paper he'd left behind. My fingers shook as I opened it. Inside was a Polaroid photograph of me, taken through twilight, walking my dog on Maplewood Avenue. The timestamp in the corner read March 3, 2024, 6:45 p.m. I recognized that evening instantly. A cold dusk, my breath fogging as I clipped a leash to my Labrador's collar. How had someone taken this picture? Was he lurking in the shadows, hidden behind a parked car? My mouth went dry as panic slid down my spine. I dashed to the security monitor in the back office, a tangle of outdated cameras capturing low-res grain. I scrolled through the footage, heart pounding. I watched the suited man enter at 2:15 a.m. Then I rewound 30 minutes, expecting to catch him lurking outside, camera in hand. But the window camera's view was obstructed by a neon coffee mug sign. Mere static danced across the screen. It was as though he'd slipped through a crack in reality unnoticed. I checked every camera angle, nothing. His presence existed only in the booth. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay curled on my threadbare mattress, my mind replaying that Polaroid over and over. The way my hand curved around the leash, my dog's eager eyes, and the silhouette of a street lamp behind me. I pictured him crouched behind a tree or parked car, lens trained on my back. My phone buzzed twice with unknown numbers. No messages, just ominous silence. Every creak of the building, every passing car sent adrenaline through me. I dragged myself back to the diner the next night, hoping it was a one-time creep. But as I pulled into the lot, my headlights illuminated a black sedan parked across the street. Its windows were so dark, they seemed to swallow the light. My pulse spiked. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. By the time I reached the diner door, the sedan was gone, as though it had materialized for the briefest instant. Inside, I poured coffee, restocked sugar, and forced a steady smile for the lone customer huddled at the far end of the counter. Every gust of wind from the open door made me whip my head around, expecting him. Minutes crawled by until I heard the bell again. My stomach plummeted. There he was, strolling to the corner booth exactly like the night before. I gasped softly, and he held up a finger as if to hush me, then sank into the seat. I tried to ignore him. My heart thudded as I wiped down tables, keeping my back turned. After a few minutes, I gathered enough courage to approach him. He sipped his coffee, watched me through long lashes, and the dread in his pale green eyes felt like a captive snake's cold stare. "I don't know who you are," I said, voice trembling. "Why are you here?" He set his mug down carefully, fingertips tracing the rim. "I'm an admirer," he replied softly, every syllable measured. He leaned forward, and I noticed the satchel at his side had loosened, revealing the corner of a small journal. "I see things most people don't. You intrigue me." A chill crawled across my skin. "You've been watching me." His lips curved into a thin smile. "I know you better than you know yourself." He offered a nod as if that explained everything, then stood and brushed past me. Before he reached the door, he slid a second folded note beneath the tabletop. My reflection from the surveillance camera, printed on glossy paper, time-stamped March 15, 2024. In the image, I was fixing a spilled glass of water at the counter, oblivious to being photographed. His half-gaze lingered on me as he exited, leaving the bell's jingle hanging in the stagnant air. That night, I barely closed the diner. I called campus security, the local police, even a private investigator friend back home. But pictures and receipts weren't enough to identify him. No one saw him enter or leave. The car never had a license plate visible. It was like chasing a wraith. Over the next 2 weeks, the sightings escalated. I'd catch glimpses of him in my peripheral vision outside my apartment building, standing behind trees as I walked my dog, vanishing whenever I spun around. One night, I found a small GPS tracker stuck on the back of my water bottle as I tossed it out in the office kitchen. I panicked, tore my jacket sleeves to ribbons, trying to peel off any other devices he might have planted. I switched jogging paths, changed my coffee orders, and started driving to work on different routes, but nothing deterred him. One Sunday, as I was closing, he slid into the booth opposite the cash register at 3:01 a.m. My breath hitched. He pulled a battered journal from his satchel and slid it across the table. My trembling fingers opened it to reveal pages filled with newspaper clippings. My name and headlines from high school art contests, community college awards, even a graduation photo. Interspersed were Polaroids he'd taken me unloading groceries from my car, me brushing my teeth through a cracked open window, me sleeping on my couch, my most vulnerable moments trapped on glossy film. In the margins, in neat but sinister handwriting, I saw phrases like, "I know where you sleep, and your every move is mine to observe." My throat tightened. He lifted a single finger, pointed at one photo of me asleep, eyes closed, face peaceful. Beneath it was printed, March 28, 2024, 2:17 a.m. That night I was in the diner, I whispered, voice cracking. "How?" He closed the journal calmly, as if folding a map. "I am always here," he said, voice velvet over steel. He took the diner keyring from the counter, my set, slung the satchel over his shoulder, and vanished into the blackness as though swallowed by the very shadows. I tumbled to the floor, gasping, clutching my chest. I locked every door and window that night, barely sleeping as I listened for footsteps outside. My apartment felt smaller, darker, like his presence lurked around every corner. The next morning, I quit my job. I handed in my 2-week notice to Big Jim, who stared at me with concern and guilt. He said he'd install better cameras, station an overnight guard, anything to keep me safe. But I couldn't stay. Every memory of that corner booth, his cold eyes, the scratch of his pen marking my worst fears, convinced me I had to leave this town forever. I moved 3 states away under a new name. I deleted all social media, cut every link to my old life. I rent a cramped apartment with security cameras and deadbolts, and I never walk my dog at dusk anymore. Every unexpected knock on my door, every car slowing on my street, makes my heart thunder. I jump at shadows and flinch at minor sounds, the creak of a floorboard, the hum of a TV in the next unit. Sometimes I dream of him standing at the edge of my vision, satchel in hand, his finger pressing the shutter as if to trap me again. In my nightmares, I'm back at Big Jim's, scrubbing coffee stains. When he glides in to hand me that cursed journal, I wake drenched in sweat, heart pounding like a sledgehammer, convinced he's there, waiting. I share this story in case you ever find a photo of yourself in a place you don't recall being shot. If you discover a Polaroid taped under a table or glancing back at you from a dust-coated shelf, don't hesitate. Call the police immediately. Change your locks. Alter your routine, if you can, because when someone decides you're their obsession, they'll stop at nothing, slipping through the night, capturing every moment, until there's nothing left of your life that feels like your own. Once that happens, you learn the hard way that safety is an illusion, and fear can follow you wherever you go.